Hello, developers. Welcome to Elixir Pro. Here we discuss strategy and tips for your Elixir learning journey. This is from zero to a hero as an Elixir developer. And today we're going to be talking about LiveView pages. So before you start, you'll probably see if you check the description about this video two things. One is our private Telegram channel, and the second is the article about this video specifically. And what's happened when you are creating live view pages. So one of the things that you can notice is when you are talking about live view specifically, we have an awesome tools like uh, real time and a way to update and send broadcast pages. And one of the things that you probably will face is kind of bugs because you don't know two simple tools to work with Elixir. You can read the documentations. I post the link in the article, but also this is the documentations explaining how temporary assignment works. And I'm going to explain what is the temporary assignment for me to make the things easier when you are working with LiveView. And before we start, I'm going to introduce a little bit more about this topic. And I'm gonna share my screen, show to you the app that I've created, which is straightforward. It's only Phoenix new project. As always, if you've been following this channel, you will always see like this command. And after this command, I just ignore the database because we're not gonna use that at this moment. And I just started the app. We don't have pages right now. We still don't have pages. We're going to create some of them. Basically, one page to show this example. And before we start creating the page, I'm just giving these recommendations to create your app to follow this video very well. What is the temporary assign? You can read the article, but for me, was I understand the purpose when I read the article, but it's better I explain how this thing was much easier for me instead of what we have in the article. So for me, the temporary assigns with PHX pages is a simpler way to prevent bugs in your live view pages when you have like a list and possible real-time interactions with your pages, and you can define the best behavior with your team, product owners, and the user experience. For example, okay, you got only a list in your live view pages, it's fine. But how about if you need to update this list and send a broadcast? Things is gonna be changed because what is the expected behavior when you receive a new element? Hang on. So this is important because I recommend what I'm facing now and what I figured that out is it's important before you create any list in your live view pages or especially a list, because you're gonna see after this video why. I strongly recommend you think about these two attributes, temporal assigns and PHX update, because you're going to provide a better experience to the users and a better way to communicate this with your team. So you can check this article. We are going to be talking about all of them. We're gonna see the advantage, disadvantage, the pairing that I've been using, which is for me it's cool, but it's better you describe with your team. You're gonna have more arguments when we're talking about live view pages, but you need to understand why and when and how to use to discuss this with your team and product owners. How do I figure that out? When you are building LiveView pages, you probably just care about get these things done or get the expected behaviors. For example, when we are talking about list, I just want to expose the list. But what about when you reload pages, and what about if, as I mentioned, in real time, your list will work normally if you only have a list, and the default behavior is a prepend list, but some bugs appears when necessary to update this list. Imagine that you have comments or you have a chat. For example, what is the expected behavior? Prepend, we're gonna put your element on the top of the list. But when we're talking about chats, we need to use the append, and the elements most of the time are the same, but in different orders. And we need to give this expected behavior to the application. Why temporary assigns is so important? It is so straightforward to use and can avoid many future problems with a couple of lines implemented. You only need to define what is important in your list and what is possible, what is a possible expected behavior when you update that. Why temporary assign can get consistent live view pages? Because you can only define the expected behavior when new elements come. And if you don't have this feature for now, you can prevent kind of a bug in the future with only a few ways to sync in your elements when you use temporary assign and PHX update. You will see that in practice now. So as you can see, we have this article. We're gonna test first without using the temporary assigns and PHX update. After temporary assign and PHX update, we will see some other behaviors. So first of all, we need to create a live view page. I'm going to change this guy to a live page, live. And what we're gonna do is live page live.ex. Let's create this module. So I'm gonna use this way right here. This is a live view page. So what we are gonna do is live view def mount. We're going to ignore the params in session. We're gonna use socket. Let's create our HTML. Hi. So this is our default page now. As you can see, we just have one information. We've created that. And what we are gonna do now is, let's prepare this page. First of all, we're gonna, every page that you create using LiveView, you have a process ID. When we use self erlang feed to list, let's check what's going to happen. We've got our process ID, which is really cool. Two things that's going to happen. We're going to provide elements list to our page. So we're going to have like assign, socket, messages. This is going to be a linked list. And now we need to update this list. But before, we're going to create a list, messaging. This is very similar with the documentation, but pay attention what you can learn here. So we are gonna have I, and we're gonna have like strong name. We're gonna say message dot username, and or maybe strong and message will be, for example, message dot text. I think this is enough for now. And to use our LiveView page, imagine that it could be a broadcast or you can just receive the list. But in our case, we are going to use handle info. So we're going to have an event. I have a process ID, for example. We're going to send like speed add message. This is going to be our pattern matching. So let's create our message. And our message will always have like an ID. And we're going to say that the ID is going to be random uniform 10,000 and username, in this case Elixir Pro. I think it's fine, and the message will be hi random uniform. Oops, sorry. This one. This is going to be kind of message that we are going to send to our application. So as I mentioned, LiveView, it's a process ID, and we need to handle with a handle info to receive outside messages. And this is going to be our pattern matching. And no reply socket. And one of the things that we are going to do now is we've got our socket. We need to update the socket. We're going to have socket messages, and our function will be messaging, new message, and messages. And one, sorry. So let's start playing with this way. So now we have our process ID. And we need to send message to this application, to this page, sorry. So let's create our process ID. And we're gonna have our message. And let's send one. Text, not font. So sorry about that. My message, it's a little bit different. It's not message, it's text. My bad here. There you go, worked. It still does not appear for us. Why? So what is our process ID? I think our process ID has changed. Yes, it's changed. Let's copy this one. Try again. And there you go, we've got our message. Let's try that again. And we got another message. So what's happened? We are using an append. If you check this one, 1599 is the first one. Let's just work a little bit more with our list. I don't know if it's really work. I'm going to try. I've never tried that again. I just use that pattern. What about if we do it? It's going to reload and we're going to lose our process ID and try again. We were using the append. Let's check if we change the way that we're going to manipulate our list, it's going to work. So let's get this process ID. So I'm just going to replace this one, create the message, send this one, and it doesn't work. It could work if you change this way, but because we're using a capture function, that is the way to make this guy work. So you can try this one again. I think probably, I'm just curious now. I was not planning for it. Let's do this using like instead of prepaint and append. So we've got our list, and I want to include the new element here to compile. Let's try again. So we've got our message, and let's send this one. Worked. So the behavior now it's an append, not a prepend. Let's create another message, send again. And as you can see, we can have the expected behavior. But what about if we already have the message ID 60 and we send this message again? As you could see, the element is duplicated. How can we avoid this way? We're gonna talk about now how to avoid this one, and we checked the expected behavior. So what's happened is whatever I can receive an element, and I'm just going to add. Doesn't matter if it's a pen or a prepend. I'm going to add a new element. So, but sometimes we've got we don't want to show duplicate message. So, for example, imagine that you send like three messages duplicated to the user. So the list is going to be very large. And to avoid this way, we can we're going to use the pattern, the DOM patchings and the temporary assigns. So our first step is to start using the temporary assign. So in the documentations, I'm going to jump to this way. So we can only say what is the element that is going to be temporary. And we're going to say that the messages to the full is going to be an empty list. I like using that pattern matching that I showed to you a couple minutes ago. So it's going to be messaging in our list. So now we've got the temporary assign. Let's try again. So we've got our process ID, and we're going to send message to our page. So first, I'm going to copy this process ID. I'm going to create that. Created the process ID. Now we've got the temporary assign. One of the things that's important, what about we have an ID, message ID right here. We could say like username, message dot ID. Something like that. I think it's better. Maybe easier to identify elements. So the element, and let's send our message now. So there you go. This is our message. I'm going to try to create another one and send this one. So as you could see, it didn't work. Why it didn't work? When we use the temporal sign, what is the default behavior? We are going to replace the contents. I'm sorry, we're still not using the don't patching. We are using the temporal sign. But what's happened now is that we started ignoring the same elements. As you could see, I tried to send the same one like this and didn't work. But if I create another message and send this one again, we are going to replace the old element. What's happened? When you use temporal sign, by default, you start using something simulated with phx update. And the default behavior when you use phx updated is the replace. This operation replace with the new content. So imagine that you are receiving chat messages. Only every time that we receive a new one, we are going to replace our list to a new element. So what I can say, if you really need that behavior, it's okay. But I think that's not the specific case that we're going to use that. So what about if we use the ignore? What about if we start using the phx update? To use that, we need to do two things. First one, the elements that we're going to include the list should have an ID. For example, here we can include messages, phx update. Let's start using some behaviors. What about the ignore? When we just do it and check our list, we're gonna have this process ID now. Let's create another over to a process ID. What about if we send this message? So what's happened now is that we are probably ignoring the message. Let's try create one, and it's just ignore. So seems that the expected behavior for ignore is not send a message. Most of your keys you're going to use append and prepend, but let's start talking about a chat. I think this is the most common. You can try to use by yourself the prepend, and when we include that, one of the things that's going to happen is we are going to have our list. So unfortunately, this is not. I'm using the Safari here, so I didn't allow to use a dev environment. I'm going to replace this to a Chrome. And now we've got another browser. And let's start sending messages. And also let's inspect our browser as well. So that's going to happen probably. Now it's okay, it's working, but let's send a message here, and then we're gonna see some things blowing up. So now I'm going to create another process ID, create the message, and send this one. As you can see, so probably the ignore didn't work because I didn't provide you this inspect elements. So the error that we received was not in our terminal, but was in our browser. It's saying that only HTML elements tagged with an ID are allowed inside containers with a pcheck update. So that's why the ID in this case is very important. And to use that, we can just use this way, messaging.id. This is more than enough to make our page start working. Hello, Dominique, how are you? So now let's copy our ID and let's create the message and let's send this message again. Oh, didn't work. Why? This is an integer, so let's use like string to integer, and things going to work now. Sorry, my bad. So now let's get our process ID. Got one. We've got our message, and when I send this one, it should work. Why it didn't work? It's another process ID. So sorry about that. So let's replace this process ID. Sending the message. Oh, string to integer. So if this is happening here. It's integer to string. My bad again. Now it's gonna work, I promise. Let's refresh the page. Get the process ID and make this guy work now. Let's send the message. As you could see, we've got the message and the HTML error disappeared. Let's try to send the same message. And as you could see, we are not updating our list because now we've got an ID. And this is a really awesome way to avoid duplicate items in our list. And this is important as well because when you use pcheck update with temporal sign, magic happens. You can define how to order your elements, not repeat the same element on your screen, and define the best behavior for your user by simply adding pcheck update. Of course, you need to include the ID attribute as you saw a couple minutes ago in your every element. But the most important thing is now we're not repeating the elements, but let's try to update our list again with a new message. Let's create one, send again. As you could see, the element is working, and also the behavior append is working as well. As you could see, I'm sorry, the append is not working because we've got the ID 2539, and we are using the append. In our element is right here. Let me try one more. Let me check what we did here. So we've got the list, and we're going to receive the message. Let's create another one. This is 186. The append should appear. It should appear right here because we are using the append. Let's send the message, and there you go. It's respecting our append. What about if we change to prepend? Let's change the process ID. Process ID. We've got the message. This is going to be the first message. We need to have another message here above. And this one, and this respect and the behavior is, um, we have the behavior when we use the PHX update. And this one for us doesn't matter. What really matters for us is what we have when we use prepend in a 10. After this video, what I expect is you understand how important it is to use temporary size and PHX update. I hope you like this video. I hope that I helped you to understand this. Sometimes this was a little bit complicated for me to understand, but when you understand it, your life is going to be much more easier when you use this kind of behaviors. When you use PHX update, when you discuss with your team, and you are prepared. What I recommend is every time that you have a list, I strongly recommend you to use this pattern here and include all the elements in your socket. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much. See you in the next one, and bye bye.